Hi, I'm Carol Grape with Crafting Change, and I'm here to show you how to do these scrappy pot holders using Insulbrite on the inside, one fabric on the outside, and basically a pieced front. What we're going to start off with is a 9-inch square of Insulbrite. This is going to be my back fabric, and then I have two pieces of thin muslin that are also 9 inches, and I am going to sandwich the Insulbrite in between these two things so that what this does is it allows the fabric to float better on my sewing machine. If I just use the Insulbrite, which is kind of fuzzy, it's going to catch on my sewing machine bed. So I decided that I would sandwich it like this. I'm going to pin it together, and then I'm going to take it to the next step. I have found that pinning works better than clipping on this particular project because sometimes the layers slip around with the clips. So I start out with pinning it. I'm going to take a fabric for the center that is I'm basically going to frame it with my other fabrics. So the first thing I'm going to do is determine with my scraps which ones might fit on here. It looks like this one will go pretty well. I'm going to put them face to face and pin this in place just briefly, and then I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch or less seam right across here. This piece will eventually get cut off and overlapped with other fabrics. I took this to my sewing machine and sewed it down, then took it to my iron and ironed it flat. I am now going to trim this edge off because our next fabric is going to go here. So then I'm going to lay this piece of fabric on like this, do the same method, pin it, and then take it over to my sewing machine and then iron it back. So in this case, I want to be careful to remove extra pin. At this point, I'm not going to worry about any of the fabrics hanging over these edges. And I stitched up to the edge here. I'm going to trim that off, and I'm not going to be too fussy about it because my next piece of fabric is going to go across here. And I want to make sure that there's enough overlap that it will go to the edge of my 9 inches. So I'm going to just lay it like that, pin it in place, and do the same thing. Again, making sure that I'm not going to hit any pins. So I'm going to take that one out. So because of the pieces of scrap I had, I did have to do a little extra here and here because I had a little exposure of my backing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to trim this to the 9 inches. Now that I have this trimmed up, I trimmed up my backing fabric as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place it face to face with the front. I'm going to pin it, and I'm going to leave a gap. Actually, I'm going to look where the top is because I'm eventually going to put a hook here. But I want to leave a gap up here so that I can turn it right side out when I'm done stitching around the back side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch all the way around the edges and at the corners, and I'll do a detail. At the corners, we're going to cut across at an angle with a small stitch. This is going to give us a really nice turn when we turn the pot holder right side out after we're going to trim all the way around here. I'm going to do a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way around. And again, I'm going to start here, go around, and stop here. And I'm going to back stitch on both of these areas so they're nice and strong for when we fold this gap in after we've turned it right side out. Because these have puffy layers, I have clipped all the way around so that things don't shift when I take it over to the sewing machine. I'm going to turn this to a 45-degree angle. I'm going to set my stitch back to the smallest I have, which is a 1 on my machine. I'm going to do 2 to 3 stitches. And then I'm going to turn it again. It's pushed the back fabric out a little bit, but my bottom is lined up with the 3/8 inch mark. I'm going to set my stitches back to 2.5, and then I'm going to finish up going around, and I'll do the same thing at each corner. What's nice about this is that now when I trim, I'm going to be cutting across fairly close to this corner, making sure I don't hit the threads, and I'm going to trim all the way around my pot holder. I'm going to start by trimming my corners first. It's easier to see the thread on this back side because it's clear, and then I'm going to finish trimming. Now on this edge where I have my opening, I'm actually going to trim. I'm going to go like this where I come up to the edges, and then I'm just going to trim to here. I want to leave that flap out because it gives me an easier amount of fabric to turn, as opposed to having this little teeny, trying to turn in that little teeny edge right there. That, and I'm going to go between the two facing fabrics, and I'm going to turn it right side out. And I'm going to use my turning tool and push into the corners. You can take the pointed end of your tool, get it a little squarer in the corners, but doing that method, thanks to Natalie, is that we get nice turned corners here. And the reason for using the smaller stitches right here was that this tool then won't poke through any other stitches that I have. So now I'm going to take it to my iron. I'm going to make a little handle. I do like to use one of the fabrics that I have either on the front or the back. I didn't have any of the back fabric, which I would have liked to have used, but I had a little piece of this one fabric. What I did is I folded it in half and then folded these edges in. I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine, and I'm only going to sew down one side at this point because really that's all we need for our hook. I know I just called it a hook. It should have been a loop. What I'm going to do then is take my loop, and I carefully folded the front and backs together, and we're going to top stitch that loop or that hole. But what I want to do is I'm going to place my loop in the center of my my pot holder. I'm going to double check. My pot holder is now 8 inches by 8 inches. So I'm going to put that in the middle of the 4 inch mark. And what I want to make sure is that you want to make sure you're tucked in far enough so that when we top stitch, it won't pull out. And I'm going to start here, and I'm going to back stitch across here, and then I'm going to top stitch as close to my edge as I can all the way around and come back and end here with another back stitch. I've sewed my loop on in the center, and now you want to make sure that you've trimmed all your threads, and then you're good to go with a nice pot holder for our charity partners. The last thing I did on this pot holder was to actually stitch in the ditch so that the front and backs won't come apart from each other as one uses the pot holder.